Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jeanette Mancia Martinez, and thank you so much for joining us on what in Nashville is a rainy and overcast afternoon. And I'm really excited and delighted to welcome you to this academic year's Peabody Research Spotlight. So maybe this is the first such event that some of you attend, and I'm assuming others of you have joined us from last academic year when we first started the Peabody Research Spotlight. So my welcome will be very brief because I want to leave as much time as possible for our speakers to have time to tell you all about our PhD programs here at Peabody. But I am the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and Graduate Education at Peabody, which essentially means the Associate Dean for everything PhD related at Peabody College. And it is really my honor to be here with you this afternoon and really help facilitate a conversation and information really that the directors of graduate study, will offer to you. So what we have in store for today, the goal and the purpose of the Peabody Research Spotlight is for everyone to get a better sense of the cross-disciplinary research that is conducted at Peabody. Can everyone see my screen? Yes, okay, sorry, but I have a weird way that it's showing for me. For everyone to get a better sense of the research that is conducted across our 5 departments. So we do have 5 departments and they are all represented today with one exception that Allie Armstead has graciously agreed to present on behalf of Dr. David Cole, who is the Director of Graduate Studies for Psychology and Human Development and couldn't join us this afternoon. But we are so pleased that Dr. Brian Christians, Dr. Sean Corcoran, Dr. Bob Hodapp, and Dr. Kevin Leander are able to be here, and they are the respective directors of graduate studies for their departments. So what we will do momentarily is that in the order that you see on the screen, each presenter will say a few words about their program and give you some information about what it is that they do departmental wise, some things that might be of interest if you're not in that department or if you're prospective students interested in joining our PhD program at Peabody. Min Oh, who's my doctoral student and has graciously agreed to help moderate the Q&A session, will keep track of questions and comments that you pose for each of our directors of graduate studies and for Allie. And then she will facilitate a short Q&A following each presentation. I know that we don't have a lot of time and we want to honor everyone's time since we said this will be from 3 to 4 p.m. Central Time. So if we don't get to your questions, we really encourage you to go ahead and note your questions down and we will get your questions to the respective person. And you can always reach out to us individually via email as well. So if you have not already done so, and I think most or all of you have, if you can please mute yourselves, that would be great. And we are going to begin with Dr. Brian Christians. Brian.
Thanks, Jeanette, and thanks everybody for joining us for this session. So I don't know if I'm seeing the right thing here, but I don't see the screen share anymore.
Okay, I thought you did not, but okay, let me try this again. Okay, can you see that
there
now?
It is.
Okay,
that
sorry,
right
I knew something happened because this is what you were supposed to be seeing while I was talking, which is not as important because you're gonna get to see the live person. So the information is just exactly the same, but now you actually get to see the slide. Sorry about that.
All right, thank you. So yes, I'm gonna say just a little bit, talk for a few minutes about the PhD program in community research and action. And we can go ahead and advance the slide. So the program is really designed to study the interface between human development and learning, which is kind of a commonality across Peabody, and community and organizational contexts. So that means some people look at how those contexts and processes outside of schools affect learning that takes place in schools. And it also encompasses a lot of learning that takes place in those community and organizational contexts outside of schools. So I think that's one way that I think about both kind of the orientation of our program, looking at transactional processes across levels of analysis, and also kind of how we fit with some of the other departments and programs that you'll be hearing about today. we don't have maskless gatherings anymore. So this picture here was from before the pandemic, and this is one of our more advanced cohorts. So some of these folks have graduated recently. These might be some familiar faces to some of you. And we can go ahead and advance the slide. So the program was launched in 2001 in the Department of Human and Organizational Development that has a large undergraduate major by that name, as well as several professional master's programs. And it exists to train action researchers. So a lot of those community and organizational contexts that we study, we're looking at processes that are geared toward social change, organizational change processes, typically with an explicit social justice orientation. So we're looking at how groups that want to improve communities and to build organizational capacity are accomplishing that, and how the people who participate in those settings are learning and developing. And so that probably implies an interdisciplinary perspective. So faculty in our graduate program have backgrounds in community and developmental psychology, human geography, community development, urban sociology, applied anthropology, and some other disciplines and subdisciplines like health policy, for example. And some of us have, so I'm actually a graduate of the Community Research and Action program myself. So some of us have interdisciplinary training from programs like this one elsewhere and here. So I started in the second cohort of students in the program in 2002, and then came back to Vanderbilt about, what is it now? This is my 5th year back, and now my 3rd year serving as program director. So we can go ahead and advance the slide. So this is the most recent cohort that entered during the pandemic, and this is them taking a cohort photo masked and socially distant outside Hobbs. So our alumni, of which there are about 50, a little over 50 now, many are in academic research and teaching positions. Many others are conducting research in a variety of other contexts. So some are in government agencies like the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Some are in policy-focused organizations and consultancies and other applied settings. So we don't solely prepare students for academic research positions. And all students are encouraged to collaborate, not just with their faculty advisor, but we do have a lot of faculty-student collaboration in groups that are project-specific, and students do gain experience with grant writing, and in many cases procure grants of their own or work on faculty-led research grants. Many students gain teaching experience as well, and we also have a program component that immerses students in community settings relevant to their research, not just as researchers, but even kind of gaining some practical awareness of what takes place in those settings. We can go ahead and advance the slide. So this is just for those of you who are not, who are in other PhD programs here at Peabody and might think about taking classes that are offered that are primarily geared towards CRA or community research and action students. And the special topics courses really rotate, and that changes based on student interests and faculty interests in different teaching topics. But these are examples of some recent ones that have been offered through our department: ending homelessness, positive youth development, and race, space, and environmental justice. The other courses listed in that left-hand column are ones that are offered more frequently. Many of them are required classes for the PhD, and so they're offered every year. And action research, for example, is offered every semester and is typically co-taught by 2 faculty in our department. There's a master's and a PhD section, but much of what those classes do is together, and that's really an engaged project focused class that teaches a variety of mixed methods in collaboration with community groups. Community development theory is a very popular class. I think a lot of these, you can look up the course descriptions, and if you have any questions now about any of them, I can answer some of those now, or we can be in touch and I can put you in touch with the instructors of these courses as well if they're of interest. So I'll wrap up my comments there and see if there are any questions.
Thank you so much. So let's see, Min.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have our first question. Does the content of the CRA program translate to larger groups such as the state, national, or global level?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the course in public policy, for example, does focus on multiple levels of policy, and a lot of the processes that we are studying do have policy implications or are really geared toward change that would result in policy changes at a state or a federal level. A lot of them are also local. So that's, and I think, some do have global or international implications, although we're typically not studying some processes that are taking place in equivalent ways all the way across the globe.
Thank you. We have another question for you. What types of supports do PhD students in the program receive as they seek collaborative research opportunities with the community or organizations?
So what variety of supports are you asking about? Like financial or kind of mentoring or?
Mentorship opportunities.
So students do have a lot of opportunities for mentored research all throughout their time in the program. And some of that comes through working on faculty research projects or collaborative projects with other faculty and students. And some do, and this really gets kind of negotiated and brainstormed as students make their way through the programs, to what extent they're doing independent research, maybe with a community group that they've built a connection with, as opposed to working in a more scaffolded setting. And many students do some of both, but we really seek to support students getting engaged in a variety of existing projects so that they do have that support.
Okay, well, thank you, so much, Dr. Christians. And of course, more questions that students, prospective occurrence may have, they will reach out to you directly. So we're gonna go ahead and continue. And now with Dr. Sean Corcoran, LPO.
Great. Thanks, Jeanette, and good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Sean Corcoran. I'm an associate professor of public policy and education. I'm in my 4th year at Peabody, and in my 3rd year as the director of graduate studies for the PhD program. And I just want to warn everyone that I have a repairman coming to my house imminently at any moment. And so it's quite possible that you could hear my doorbell ring in the next 5 minutes, but let's cross our fingers and hope that doesn't happen. So I'm going to talk about the Department of Leadership, Policy and Organizations, LPO, as well as our PhD program in Leadership and Policy Studies. So you can go on to the next slide. So I'll start with the department, LPO. It's going to sound very familiar to what you heard from Brian, in that our department and our faculty are very interested not only in education, but also other institutions that help human beings develop and reach their full potential. So this comes from our mission statement, which is our mission is to increase understanding and guide improvements in human learning and outcomes in the political, economic, organizational, social, legal, and regulatory context in which human development occurs. So as you heard from Brian, many of our faculty are as interested in what happens inside of schools or outside of schools as what happens inside of schools. Okay, next slide. Our faculty do come from a very wide range of disciplinary traditions, including economics and sociology, political science, history, public policy, interdisciplinary programs in K-12 and higher education, organizational behavior, business, and law. The department has more than 30 faculty, with roughly 12 to 15 core faculty in the PhD program. Next slide. The PhD program is one of 8 or 9 programs. I'm hoping I'm not leaving one of our programs off this list. We have a variety of master's programs in education policy, higher ed administration, independent school leadership, international education, leadership and organizational performance, as well as EDD programs in education leadership and policy and leadership and learning in organizations. Lots of combinations of like E's, L's, and O's in those. I try to keep all of these programs straight. So the 2 EDD programs are very much like our PhD program, but more towards a practitioner point of view. And so I'm here primarily to talk about the PhD program in leadership and policy studies. And you can go on to the next slide. The LPS, the Leadership and Policy Studies PhD program, is primarily designed for students who intend to build an academic career focused on the study of education and policy as researchers, professors, and policy analysts. So the vast majority of our alumni go on to academic positions, but many will go on and work in government and policy, and in some cases in schools and related organizations. So the program is allowing students to examine education policy and problems through an interdisciplinary lens that's focused in our program on economics, political science, history, sociology, and international education. Students typically come to our program focused on K-12 education policy or higher education policy, although the line between those two is certainly blurring more over time. Like other PhD programs at Peabody, it's a 4 to 5 year program and an apprenticeship model where students are paired with faculty from day one and often are engaged with collaborative research with them from the very beginning. We typically average about 5 to 6 new students per year. Last year, we had a bumper crop of about 9 new students, and this past year we had 4. They come to us with a wide variety of prior experiences in education, ranging from humanities and social sciences to the hard sciences. Many of our students have experience working in schools, which is a really valuable thing to bring to the study of education policy. Next slide. The core curriculum of our program is very heavily focused on research methods, primarily quantitative methods, but also qualitative methods as we're increasing our capacity in that area. Our students take a core of 4 social science courses that I'll mention later, as well as a year-long research practicum that happens in year 1 that builds students' data analytics skills, working with real education data and writing their first paper. The department offers PhD seminars on K-12 and higher education policy topics. I'll mention some of those here in a moment, as well as a PhD Pro Seminar, which is primarily opportunity for professional development. And then students will round out their course requirements with electives, both within LPO as well as the other departments in Peabody that you're hearing about today. Next slide. We're really proud of our graduates. I wish I could tell you about the history of our program, but it's such a long and storied history. It was here long before me. I was well aware of this program, this PhD program, before coming to Vanderbilt. It was one of the big draws for me as a faculty member to come to Peabody and work with these graduate students. They're winners of frequently winners of national fellowships and awards, including the National Academy of Education Spencer Foundation Dissertation Fellowship, the AERA Dissertation Fellowship. And one of our recent alumni is Dominique Baker, who was featured in a Peabody Research Spotlight last semester, was the AFP New Scholar Award this year, which was a very selective award. As I said, most of our students go on to academic careers. Here's some examples from recent placements: Texas A&M, George Mason, NYU, University of Southern California. But again, many of our grads will also go into non-academic positions at research institutions like RAND or the National Opinion Research Center. Next slide. I wanted to give you just a sample of some of the topics that our faculty and students are currently working on. There's a lot of these, so I'll run through them really quickly, but they'll give you a good sense of what we do. The first 2 have to do with teacher quality, educator quality. So policies and practices that identify and develop effective teachers and leaders. and practices within schools to help cultivate talent and retain talent in schools. Several of our faculty are doing research around diversity of the educator workforce, so policies of schools as well as districts and states for improving the pipeline of diverse educators. Another topic of interest is in gifted education. Jason Grissom, one of our core faculty members, has published multiple papers on equity and access to gifted education. I've written a little bit on this topic myself in New York City, which has a very stratified system of selective schools. One of my colleagues, Joanne Golan, has done extensive research on no excuses charter schools and what those schools do in terms of transmitting cultural skills, behaviors, and habits. Chris Candelaria, one of my colleagues, is interested in school funding and school finance adequacy and equity between and within school districts. It's also a topic that I've worked on a little bit in my career. Go on to the next one. Will Doyle, one of our experts in higher education, has done work on geographic variation in access to higher ed, as well as the impact of higher ed on civic engagement. Sean Doherty and his graduate students are currently working on career and technical education and the effects of these programs on long-run educational attainment and earnings. School choice, a topic that's come up in a couple places here, is a long time research interest of mine. I've looked at the effects of information, peers, and school context on public school choice decisions. And one of my colleagues, Claire Smirker, has looked at the impact of desegregation plans and school choice on families, schools, and neighborhoods. Adela Solis has looked at policies affecting success in community college. There are actually several of my colleagues interested in success in community college. And you can go on to the next slide. Our new faculty member, Cesare Warren, is looking at conditions that affect the educational success of Black boys. And I'll skip down to the second to last one here on equity and quality in digital learning. Our chair, Carolyn Heinrich, has done extensive research on digital learning platforms, which has taken on new meaning during the COVID era. So this is just a sampling of the topics that our students and faculty are currently working on. Next slide. I just wanted to mention first, those of you who are in other doctoral programs throughout Peabody, that there are courses that you can take within our program. These include our quantitative methods core, which you see here, including causal inference, which is a popular course. We have several classes on qualitative methods that may be of interest. Here are the 4 courses in our social science core, in economics, social context, history, and politics and governance. And then here's a sampling of our doctoral seminars as well. So we've recently offered courses in school leadership, school choice, school improvement research, international education policy, and urban education. So you can reach out to any of the faculty members overseeing these classes, or to me, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction if you're interested in these classes. Oh, and then lastly, this semester we've introduced a new student-led workshop for research in progress that we're calling the PEP Seminar, which is the Peabody Education Policy Seminar. So students give PEP talks, which we all could use a PEP talk these days. It meets Wednesdays from 12 to 1, and it's open to the broader community too. So if this is something that you're interested in sitting in on or getting on the mailing list, I can put you in touch with the organizers. And I think that's my last slide.
That's right. Thank you so much, Dr. Sean Corcoran. And I'll hand it over to Min for a Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much. Could you talk a little bit about the key milestones that the PhD program students are expected to meet during the program?
Yes. So the first 2 years are focused around the core coursework. And then we do have comprehensive exams that follow our second year. And the comprehensive exams are focused on research methods and the 4 content areas, social science core. Students will typically propose, like in other programs, a dissertation topic towards the end of their 3rd year or beginning of their 4th year, with the hope that they'll defend by the end of their 5th year.
Thank you. And I think we have a question about the link to the PEP seminar registration for those who are interested as well.
Yes, I can put the name of the organizer in the chat, and you can get on a mailing list.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't think there were other questions right now. Is that right, Min?
We have a few. We had one for Dr. Corcoran, if you're accepting PhD students for the upcoming fall semester.
We are indeed.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much. And look at that, no interference with anything, Sean. So good to go. Thank you so much. And I'm sure students will reach out to you and we'll let you know of other questions that might come up as well.
Please do.
So now we will turn it to Ms. Allie Armstead, who will be telling you all about psychology and human development. Allie.
Hi, thanks, Jeanette. Hi, everyone. My name is Allie. I am the education coordinator for psychology and human development here at Peabody. This is my 12th year at Peabody, my 8th in psychology and human development. And I'm going to give you a brief overview of our department. It's going to be kind of rapid fire because I, being the super achiever that I am, made 48 slides, and know in your hearts that I tried to condense it down. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so first up, our clinical science area. So our PhD program, Psychological Sciences, is actually a joint venture between us and the College of Arts and Science Psychology Department. And so the clinical science program is really a joint program. So there are 2 directors of clinical training, 2 groups of students, and I've included in this slide some of the research areas that our faculty specifically are focused on. The clinical science program, the idea is that we are training researchers and academics. There are a limited number of students who decide to go into private practice, as is the nature of clinical science, but primarily the training is for research and academics. Next slide, please. Some of our core faculty include Dr. David Cole, who is our DGS, Dr. Bruce Compass, who is the co-director of clinical training, Dr. Elizabeth Dykins, who is also director of the Vanderbilt Kennedy Center, and then we have Dr. Judy Garber, Dr. Catherine Humphreys, and Dr. Autumn Fujala. Next slide, please. Okay, so cognition and cognitive neuroscience. This is another one of our areas that is joint with arts and science. Our students take classes across both departments, and they are, again, primarily training researchers and academics. On the left, you'll see the research areas include visual perception, attention and performance, concepts and categories, perception and action, spatial cognition, so on and so forth. Again, none of these are my areas of expertise, but I am more than happy to connect you with any faculty member in any of these areas if you're interested, or even to connect you with current students in the area if that would be helpful. Next slide, please. Some of our core faculty include Dr. James Booth, Dr. Sarah Brown-Schmidt, Dr. Daniel Levin, Dr. Laura Novick, Dr. Craig Smith, and Dr. Dwayne Watson, who is also our Associate Dean of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for Peabody. Next slide, please. Cognition in context. So this is a new area under psychological sciences. I believe it is the 3rd year. I believe it's the 3rd year. And there is quite a bit of overlap between the cognition and cognitive neuroscience and the cognition in context area and faculty. But one thing that sets it apart is its focus on cognition in real world context. It's very flexible. So one of the great things about this program being new and sort of small is that the program of study is very flexible. So students are able to sort of craft with their advisor or faculty member sort of their own program of study, which we found is something that's really unique and sort of neat in a doctoral program, in that you have all of this time and sort of space to find the things that you're interested in. Next slide, please. Core faculty, you'll notice some overlaps. Dr. James Booth, Dr. Sarah Brown-Schmidt, Dr. Lisa Fazio, Dr. Levin, Dr. Bethany Riddle-Johnson, who is our current chair in psychology and human development, Dr. Novick, Dr. Smith, and Dr. Watson. Next slide, please. Developmental science. So developmental science is something that's sort of unique to psychology and human development, primarily because of the demographic of people that it serves. The way that I tell prospective students that they can tell the difference between arts and science psychology and psychology and human development are the demographics that we study. So over here at Peabody, infancy and childhood, children and adolescents are really the primary focus of faculty in my department, and sort of that's how you can tell the difference between us and arts and science. Next slide, please. All right, so core faculty, again, you'll see some overlap. Again, Doctors Amy and James Booth, Dr. Meg Saylor, Dr. Georgine Troseth, Dr. Lane, Dr. Needham, and again, Dr. Riddle-Johnson. Next slide, please. Educational neuroscience. So now this one's really neat. So our educational neuroscience program is actually a joint interdisciplinary venture with the Vanderbilt Brain Institute. So we have students who are essentially housed with the Vanderbilt Brain Institute, and they cycle through, they call them rotations, not unlike med school. So students will do rotations at Peabody here in psychology and human development. We've had students do neuroscience rotations in special education. And so your first 2 years are a residency where you're sort of touring labs in a sense. And then your third year, you finally you sit where you land, right? And they have all kinds of very fancy machinery, top-notch educators, researchers. They have access to very cool things that have lots of very long names that I won't bore you with. But if you are specifically interested in educational neuroscience, I'm more than happy to connect you with Roz Johnson, who's a program coordinator for the Vanderbilt Brain Institute and who helps sort of manage the whole program. Next slide, please. Core faculty include Dr. James Booth, Dr. Catherine Humphreys, Dr. Gavin Price. One thing you will notice is that our faculty really touch a lot of areas, which I think is the thing that's really neat about our department, is that our faculty are very interdisciplinary, which is very cool because you can work in a lab and have a faculty member who has projects with someone in developmental science or cognition and cognitive neuroscience while you sit in clinical. That is something I think that makes my program very unique, my department, including the fact that we are a psychology department at an ed school, which is kind of fun. Next slide, please. Quantitative methods. So the quantitative methods I think would be of most interest to students who are current doctoral students at Peabody, just in terms of the collection of amazing stats courses that are applicable across disciplines, right? And so we have a number of quantitative methods classes that are offered either every semester or every other semester that students in other departments are more than welcome to take. Every semester I send out an email to all of the ed coordinators in the other departments at Peabody with a list of every quant class that we're offering for the semester. So be on the lookout for that. Also, that information is posted on our website in the quantitative methods area. You can see what the course offerings are for the semester, who teaches it, what day and time, so you don't have to fuss with yes. Some of the course offerings that have been of interest to students in other disciplines are Psych GS 8861, which is our statistical inference class. Psych GS 8867, multivariate statistics, and then there is 8858, Introduction to Statistical Inference. Those classes have typically seen a high number of students from LPO and teaching and learning. So if that's something you're interested in, my suggestion is to get a seat as fast as you can as soon as registration opens. Next slide, please. Core faculty. Dr. Lee Chen, Dr. Sunju Cho, Dr. David Cole, Dr. Shane Hutton, who is also the co-director of the master's program in quantitative methods, Dr. David Lubinsky, Dr. Christopher Preacher, Dr. Sonia Sturber, and Dr. Hal Wood. Next slide, please. Okay, so in the interest of not boring you all to tears or wasting everybody's time, I've included a very lovely QR code that will take you directly to the website that has a listing of all of the research labs in our department. There are quite a few. There are like 7 slides, and I don't know if we have time for that, Jeanette, but the QR code will take you straight to the website, and you can click and peruse to your heart's content. Actually all of our labs have their own websites. It'll list the lab staff, the projects that they're working on. It'll also have a list of the current graduate students in the lab, which I find is really helpful. There's typically also a list of like publications that have come out of the lab, especially for prospective students when you're looking at backgrounds for graduate programs. This is a really good place to start for our department. And I think the next couple of slides are just like lists of labs, which they're very pretty, but not especially helpful. Yeah, there's a lot of them. It's a lot of slides. And so my suggestion is to use that QR code, or you can email me. I'm more than happy. And I'm going to put my scheduling link in the chat in case anybody wants to set up some time to ask more questions, or they think of something later.
Thank you, Ali. That was great. And I'm thinking this might be a good time. We'll see what's up on the chat for people to ask questions if they have a question of a specific lab, for example, that you didn't get a chance to touch on specifically. So thank you. That was super great. And let's see what Min has in terms of some questions that emerged for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have a question about a typical academic trajectory for students in the program, and if the key milestones vary based on the specific line of study.
So the trajectory is essentially the same, right? All graduate students are funded for up to 5 years. The due dates for various milestones can vary, but I can tell you what they are. So students propose a master's thesis sometime at end of their 2nd year. There is a qualifying exam or a major area paper. There's a dissertation proposal and then a final defense. Our clinical students, in addition to the 5 years, there is a 1-year internship, that full-time internship that is required by the American Psychological Association. It's part of our accreditation program. So those students do that additional 6th year, and those internships are 99.9% of the time funded and are usually like out of state. It's a whole thing. There's a match program, it's a thing, but at the end of your internship, that is when your degree is conferred. So everyone except for clinical science does the regular 5 years.
Thank you so much. There's one more question for you.
Sure.
So it seems like there are a lot of language-based labs in the department. Do students get opportunities to collaborate across the labs if the topic is similar?
Yes, very much so. So one of the great things, and you'll notice that there were lots of repeats in terms of core faculty in the different areas. The easiest way to sort of get a sense of what the collaboration looks like is to visit the individual faculty pages and take a look at their papers and publications, and also their presentations. And you'll start noticing a lot of names. Faculty who are often paired together, who have projects or have grants that they're working on together. That's one of the really great things about being in this department, is having 5 distinct areas, but there still being some overlap. And our faculty are really great about being intentional about allowing their students chances to cross-collaborate.
Okay, thank you so much, Ali. Again, that was really informative, and we appreciate you doing this for us. And I'm sure students will reach out directly with more questions, and I know you have the answers. So thank you. And we're going to go ahead and move on to special education, DGS, Dr. Bob Hodapp.
Hi, hello. I'm Bob Hodapp, and a few people were talking about things. I think I've been here 18 years, and I've been the DGS for about 6. And thank you, Jeanette and Min, for doing this. If you could give me the next slide, please. Okay, first I'm going to start by sort of bragging. We are a very prominent department. The department started in the 1960s. It is probably the best known special ed department in the country. We have been ranked first by US World and Report for the last decade or so. We're highest in research publications, grants received, faculty and graduated students awards, all that kind of stuff. we are primarily training our PhD graduates for academic jobs in departments throughout the country. There are a few who go into some leadership positions in think tanks and things, but I would say the large majority are academics. Okay, next slide, please. The organization of the department is in a couple ways. First of all, we are simultaneously running essentially 3 different levels, if you want. We have undergraduates, about 40 or 50 of them, who are majors in 2 of our 3 areas. I'll get to that in a minute. We have a very large master's program, and we have a fairly small doctoral program. The way that we are divided is into 3 main areas, and these are areas that come out of the Office of Special Education Programs. This is the way the federal government kind of divides things, and that is by children, or young children, meaning 0 to, I think it goes up to about 6 now or 8, and sort of early intervention kinds of things. But what special ed people call high incidence, which is those problem areas, behavior problems, other kinds of things that occur more, reading problems that occur more, that are more common, and then low incidence, and that itself is divided into 2 areas. One is children with more severe disabilities and children with visual impairments. We have a new and sort of revitalized visual impairments and blindness program, and Rachel Schluss is our new program coordinator. The other thing I wanted to mention for those of you who are interested in this is we have a very vibrant applied behavior analysis program. These are the people who go into schools and work with a special ed teacher, and in order to kind of work on, for the most part, behavior problems. So this is kids with pretty severe behavioral problems. They're difficult to control. They're very difficult to handle in the classroom setting. The other thing I should mention is that for doctoral students, all 3, and even for masters, all 3 of those main program areas, one can also work in ABA as well. It's harder, it's more courses, it's more internships, it's a lot of things, but one can do that. And then more recently, as of really this year, we have started a standalone ABA program as well. So people still focus in on special ed, but predominantly take courses and internships and practicums in applied behavior analysis. Next slide, please. We cover really all the areas of special education, but what I would argue is that we are particularly good at a couple of them. We have many people within our department. Our department is about 20 to 25 core faculty who are interested in reading in various versions of that. We have many people who are doing applied behavior analysis. And like I said, I think the focus is probably more on children with severe challenging behavior problems. We have school-based intervention for students with challenging behavior. We have language intervention, and this goes all the way back to the 70s, really, where we have trained, particularly for in early intervention, interventionists in how to work with young children as they enter into language. We have a vibrant transition to adulthood, people who are focusing on children going from 18 or 21 when children exit the high school years, and how they are going to get jobs and live in the community and all that. We have several people who are interested in AAC, augmentative and alternative communication, communication boards, iPads, all the kinds of things that people now use to help children who cannot verbally speak and understand language. We also have several other things in terms of people who are interested in different types of intellectual disabilities, things like Down syndrome, Fragile X syndrome, Prader-Willi syndrome. We have family people who are interested in everything from parent-child interactions to parent-school connections to parental helping their children go into and through adulthood. We are interested in diversity and second language learners. And like I mentioned, we have a new person who is just revitalizing the visual impairments and blindness focus, if you want. So we have really a whole gamut of things. And I would argue that anyone who's interested in disabilities and interested in special education will find a whole bunch of people here in every part of special education and disabilities. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, in terms of the training, and this has come across in several other departments as well, we are heavily research focused. Our students graduate prepared to perform many kinds of research, all the way from multiple types of quantitative research, randomized clinical trials, quasi-experimental survey, large data set, meta-analytic, other kinds of things, qualitative research, single subject, and by that I mean applied behavior analysis, where there's usually like 3 or 4 people in the intervention. And because of that, most of the people who enter our doctoral program already come in often with their master's in special ed. We are very, very focused on research and methodology and statistics. And so it is hard to kind of do both. I would argue that most of our people are already have gotten their undergraduate major in special ed or have gotten a master's in special ed and then come into our, this is not totally true, but that mostly is true. Okay, next please. The other thing I wanted to mention about our training focus is that we are a heavily mentor model. By that I mean that just as Min is working with Jeanette, our students, we don't take a lot. We have very few students. Each of us have a couple. They work closely with their advisor on all sorts of research and writing projects. And our goal is very much to train the next generation of special education scholars, academics, and leaders. Okay, next one. In terms of being a special ed doctoral student, we are a 4 to 5 year program. All of our students, virtually all of our students get out in 5 years. We are fully funded. One of the things that, and I would argue that's probably true college-wide, we have the benefit in that in special ed, there are several federal agencies, particularly Office of Students of Special Ed Programs, OSAP, that provides leadership grants. And we have been very successful in going for those and getting those leadership grants. Those leadership grants pay all tuition, all stipends for the first 4 years, and we usually can cover a 5th if we need to. It gives the students some research support within their sort of package, and often in the later stages of the program, there are all sorts of dissertation enhancement awards, that kind of thing. And the trajectory, which has also come up a little bit already, is that in the first 2 or sometimes 3 years, students take coursework. They are involved very heavily with their advisor in research. They do these things called competencies. We have one competency in research where the student does an actual research project and writes up the whole thing. In supervision, how do you supervise younger colleagues mainly in teaching, but it works in a couple different things. And we also have a teaching competency as well, where the student works with their advisor in terms of TAing a course, and increasingly we're able to give some of our doc students teaching, independent teaching experience as well. And what I would argue is that most every student leaves with several published pieces. They have quite a bit of research, teaching, and supervision expertise, and that's essentially what we want. We want to have them totally prepared to go on and go into academic jobs that they have been very successful in getting. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Hodapp. That was great. And I'm going to turn it over to Min, and I think there are some questions already for you.
Yeah, we do. The first question is, are PhD students in the program required to publish a certain number of articles before they graduate?
They are not required to publish a certain number of articles. I think what happens is that because we know, and students know, that academic positions you do have to publish, what generally happens is that students are working on the advisor's projects. So in the beginning, they're getting publications, along the way, if you want. as time goes on, and particularly as they do this thing called the major area paper, which is just before your dissertation, we often make sure that that gets published, where they have the first authored publication that's maybe more directly in line with their own interests. And I would say, while it's not a requirement of the program that people have a set number of publications, almost every doc student leaves here with a couple, okay? At least, 2 or 3, often as many as, 8 or 10, okay?
Thank you. And there's one more question from a future applicant. Are GREs required this year for the PhD program?
That is going to be a Jeanette question, but I think not.
Last optional year that I know of. Things could change and are ever fluid, but yeah, the current status is that optional for this upcoming academic year applicants as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much again. And I'm sure, Bob, that you will get more questions if there are more coming directly to you. All right. And last but certainly not least, from the Department of Teaching and Learning, we have Dr. Kevin Leander. Kevin.
Hi, Jeanette. I'm not seeing myself. Am I on camera?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, great. Perfect. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in this seminar. And I wanted to, before we proceed, just tell you about teaching and learning. I know we're a little bit tight on time, so I'm aware of that, but I will take you in a different kind of route into the department by focusing on some specific faculty and their associated research programs and/or labs to give you a sense of kind of getting into the weeds a bit. So that's going to be my approach. But so the only organizational, I imagine there might be organizational questions, and I'm happy to field those. But the only organizational thing I'm going to tell you is actually on this first slide, and that is we are divided into 4 different programs, or 4 different areas of focus within teaching and learning. The first one, which I'm a member of myself, is language, literacy, and culture. The second one, justice and diversity in education. The third one, mathematics and science education. And the fourth one, learning and design. And while these are 4 programs, and students are, focused on one of these areas, there's actually quite a lot of traffic across them, and the students in one program often will take courses and work with folks in the other programs. And faculty also often are situated in more than one program area. So just to kind of set that up as a frame. So I'll show you some specific faculty interests and their associated programs. So next slide, please.
Okay, and before we do that, Kevin, I realize that you have less time allotted. So whoever's willing and able to stay on, if you go a little bit over, I think we will be A-okay, although I obviously am mindful of that as well. All right.
All right. The first faculty member that I'd like to highlight is Dr. Molly Collins. And Molly Collins' research focuses on language comprehension in young children. This graphic shows a goal of improving instruction and support for language and thinking through an activity such as storybook reading, and looking at how this very practical and yet theoretically informed practice of storybook reading leads to specific competencies in children, including inferential thinking, language repertoires, and so on. Just staying here for a second, within language and literacy, we have a range of folks doing, a number of our faculty do work in English language learning. So we have that focus, and we also have a focus on digital literacies and on young children practices with different kinds of texts, and also on adolescent literacy. So there's quite a range within the language and literacy group. So next, please. This slide is representing the work of our faculty member, Dr. Ebony McGee. And Ebony's work is, is broad, so I don't want to minimize it here, but she's doing quite a lot of work looking at underrepresented STEM students, faculty, and staff of color. and also looking at this idea of how to address both mental and physical health strains on students of color and faculty of color who are in the STEM fields. These are a couple of her areas of work and their coping mechanisms that they develop. So we're really, in teaching and learning, we're really sort of proud to have this group of folks that are doing innovative and cutting edge work around issues of race and culture and equity and diversity, particularly within STEM, but more broadly as well. So we have a group, and a lot of them are focused at this point in undergraduate education and graduate education, as well as work in K-12. So next, please. This is the work of Dr. Jessica Watkins, and she's also including here her doctoral student, or one of her doctoral students, Natalie DeLuca. And in this case, also in the STEM fields, she's thinking about humanizing spaces for knowledge building in science and engineering. And so many of our faculty work directly with children or directly with youth, and are thinking about those practices, how to make those practices more equitable, more humane, and documenting the work in the field or in after school clubs with children out in the schools. So we do, as you would think, a lot of work in the schools. Next slide, please. Heidi Carlone is a new faculty member who just joined us, and we're very excited that she just joined us this year. And again, you can see here designing for and studying K-12 youth STEM identities. In this case, again, a focus on STEM, but with a sort of a critical and cultural lens on STEM development. Also, Dr. Carlone's work looking at not just developing, youth STEM identities, but working with teachers and teacher development. We have a pretty broad range of folks in our department who are focused on teacher education and teacher learning and teacher development, including people like Dr. Lonnie Horn, and we offer courses on teacher learning and thinking about changing the whole, what you might call the critical ecology of schooling, by working with children, working with teachers, and working with school leadership as well. So next, please. Here is the representation of a project by my colleague, Rogers Hall, and with his collaborators. And they're doing super interesting work and looking at geographies of the city and geographies in learning spaces, and developing tools to study learning on the move, or to study learning that moves from place to place, that's not situated in a specific classroom or a specific space. And how do you understand how people learn when they're moving about and when they're in interactions with different people? So they developed a toolkit, a set of technologies, as well as some practices involved in supporting these kinds of activities for learning out in the wild, you might say. So next slide, please. This slide is the work of my colleague, Dr. Noel Enyedi. And you can see here, this is a little hard to interpret, but let me kind of give you a little bit of sense here. In this case, students are working in, these little kids are working in a kind of augmented reality environment, and where they're interacting with tools that are digitally linked to the screen that they're seeing. And so Dr. Enyedi has the students in this space interacting with different kinds of phenomena. In this case, they're learning about states of matter by actually being in the system themselves. So as they move about, the trackers that they're wearing will track them in the system, and they'll be able to study the patterns that they're making. In other cases, Dr. Enyedi has had students the little guys become bees and move about in the system and study pollination by actually being part of the system. So this is a fascinating lab that's also part of our department. Next slide, please. I just want to link, this is a master's program that's associated, but I just wanted to link this to this talk, although I know we're focused on doctoral education here, but that this particular program on learning and design has many links to our doctoral programs, as do other master's programs. And in this particular program, the idea of design takes center stage in sort of thinking about what modes of design can we think about in transforming curriculum, community partnerships, and in creating new forms of learning experience. And so this program is directed by Dr. Chris Neal, and it's a large program and has robust connections to the doctoral program as well. So I think that's my last slide, and happy to take questions.
Oh, that was perfect. Thank you so much, Kevin. And I will turn it over to Min and see if some questions have come in for you. Thank you.
Yes, we sure do. Are course requirements or milestone projects different among the 4 areas of focus in the PhD program?
Our course requirements, was that the beginning part of the question?
Mm-hmm. Course requirements or milestone projects?
Not milestone projects. Those are standard across the 4 areas, but there are some different courses that are required across there. The answer is both and. There are some core courses required across all 4 programs, and then each program will add, depending on the program, say 1 to 3 additional required courses that make it distinctive from the other programs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's one more question for you. Are there a lot of cross-department collaborations? For example, Hunter asked if there's a collaboration between DTL and LPO, for example.
Quite a few there. In fact, we have at least one faculty member that I know of in our department who is trained in LPO. We have quite a few students who take courses in LPO, and I know I've had some LPO students in my doctoral courses. There have been in the past, I don't know as much about currently, but there have been over time research projects that have connected LPO to teaching and learning. For instance, the study of structures of schooling or equity in schooling at both the classroom level and then maybe the school district level. That would be the kind of study that would span the departments, and that creates traffic between them. So it certainly seems to be fairly frequent that there's movement between those 2 departments.
Well, thank you, everyone. And thank you so much, Kevin, for hanging on and being our last presenter for today. I just want to thank everyone who was able to join us, especially our presenters, Brian, Sean, Ali, Bob, and Kevin, and encourage everyone who is and was in attendance to don't hesitate to reach out to any of them individually, reach out to me directly as well. We'd love to be able to answer questions that you might have, whether you're a current student or a prospective student in our PhD program. So thank you again, everyone. Stay safe and stay tuned for details about the next PRS, which will probably be in about a month and a half or 2. Thanks, everyone.